welcome and bienvenue. Welcome once again to another live stream. This one, we're talking about the very theme of the theme music that you hear every time we do Cladding Matters. May I introduce you to our stalwart, Steve Day of Building Safety Scheme.org, Hamish McLean, my Lord and Master of Search and Conveying, and of course, Zahrah Aullybocus of Next to Law, all of which are intimately involved in all things cladding and coping with the aftermath therein. And today's topic is no different. Today's topic being who loaded the dice in favor of the big builders. And of course, to start us off, Hamish McLean.
As often is the case, we refer to a song. Not a lot of people like Leonard Cohen. I don't know quite why. He's a tremendous poet. But there's one particular song, I can't remember it, and he does actually have the opening of the dice is loaded. And something which has come up so very recently, in fact, since the time we have been speaking about cladding, since I first met Steve, we have found this particular scenario. Whatever happens, whatever we try to do, whoever should be doing some kind of work to make places safe, make houses safe for people to live in, and make sure it's not a financial liability to them, we come up to this say everything is loaded in favour of the builder. And it doesn't matter. Councils don't take action where they could do. They should be taking action. Hey, this doesn't meet building standards or our building control. You shouldn't be moving in. They let them move in. And then, of course, it's the aftermath that causes the challenge. And I think I particularly want to reinforce this fact because we need all of this new building to go on, but there is no guarantee that we're actually going to stop the quality of building, this inferior quality of building, from continuing. There's been no demonstration from anywhere. They are saying things, but we don't have any quality control in there to do it. And it does, that aftermath puts Steve in his particular position. He's moved into somewhere, and the whole thing changed after Grenfell because people started looking at it a different way. We're looking at things a different way, but we're not doing it the right way. And unfortunately, it leaves people in the position that Zahrah's trying to help to get into a property, trying to establish the risk of that particular property to get into. And how can she do that, knowing that the dice is loaded against that person looking to buy the property?
Zahrah, how can you progress when the dice is so obviously?
You can't. But there's so many conveyancers that don't know what they're looking for, and they're willing to look the other way because they're getting regular work, and they don't want to bite the hand that feeds them.
But you've had people. You've told me yourself. You've had people come to you and say, "Yeah, I know about this, and this, but I still want to go ahead."
Yeah. They still want to go ahead. I was just telling Steve about this lady I'm acting for. Unfortunately, she's buying from the housing association and not the developer. And because I queried the form I was given, the EWS1, checked it all out, and I just kind of went, well, what's the relationship between the housing association and the person named on this form? And then it comes out the woodworks that the developer's gone bust. And I don't think they would have told me that unless I'd kept pressing for that information. So this poor lady is desperate to get into her new home, in the next week, which is not going to happen. I've now got to report this to the mortgage lender, who specifically asked, which is a very odd question, I've not seen this before, for specific confirmation that there is no outstanding works at the property on the building, and that the leaseholder wouldn't be liable for any payments. And obviously the housing association have said, yeah, fine, there's no problem. But, I'm dealing with the sales team, not the people who deal with, the maintenance and repair of it. So one arm doesn't talk to the other. So what the solicitors are telling me count, but in reality, it's going to unfold that she might have bought property in a Duff building, which coincidentally should have been registered with the building safety regulator, and it hasn't.
Good Lord. Yet more on the building safety side, which, of course, brings me to Steve. let me say the same question. If the dice is loaded, it more and more appears to be so. How do we progress?
Well, we need to firstly expose the problem. So, if the dice is stacked in the favour of the builders, which we believe it is, and there's enough evidence of that, then are they getting away with it? Because it could be, yeah, it's a bit of, I hate to say it, but buyer beware, caveat emptor, but largely people, yeah, you get your bills, but it's largely acceptable. And that's what the government's hoping, after Grenfell. The problem goes back in the box. But the problem is, the government have done some very unusual things. They've watered down the remediation standards, so it's less than the current building law. So, you can put stuff which is combustible.
Have I heard that right? They watered it down, so it's actually worse than what we had before.
Worse than what we had before, and worse and what we have now in terms of regs. So there's this middle ground that allows the developer leave the banned combustible material on fire shafts in our case. But so can you get away with that? Well, you can only if the market accepts it. And you're basically shoving the risk then onto the insurer and the lender and the customer, and that's what's being rejected. And that's why you're seeing high insurance premiums in perpetuity. So what did the government do? Well, they said, we need to take the political heat off this insurance thing. So what we'll do is we'll introduce a reinsurance scheme, which takes away some of that risk. But they're only going to do that for 2 to 3 years. So what happens with all that combustible material that's left on the building when the reinsurance stops and premium goes up, or you can't get insurance at all? So it's a very, very short-lived political gimmick to try and take some of the political heat off the fact they're leaving the combustible material on buildings and the insurers don't like it. But that's one thing. But the other thing is, going forward, the building regulator basically told the London Assembly a couple of weeks ago that 40% of the applications they're receiving can't prove that they're meeting regs, the law of the land, the building. So what does that mean? Have they changed? No. And do you know why? It's because the dice is stacked in their favour. And
so there's no pressure on them really to change. It's just lip service.
No, and that's right. And just to remind everyone, I think we need to remind ourselves that, there's some pretty shocking stats out there. The worst being Taylor Wimpey, at 77% of all of their blocks of flats under the developer contract are actually so full of defects that they're actually a risk to life. Then we've got Crest Nicholson coming in as the second at 69%, Bellway at 43%, and Barrett at 35%. And you might think, Barrett's only 35%. But think about if it was a plane. 2/3 of the planes are all right, but a third aren't. And they're so dangerous, they'll put your life at risk. And because people are sleeping,
the wings will fall off for no apparent reason.
Yeah. Would you get on that plane? I don't think so. Yeah, that's what we're dealing with. So, the builders need to be made to pay. It needs to be financial and it needs to be liability. And of course, that's the work of our scheme with the Earl of Lytton coming back later this year into the House of Lords for debate and hopefully voting with successful win.
Okay,
frankly,
Zahra's keen to jump in. Hang on, sorry.
I mean, Steve, you talking about planes? I was watching something about black box thinking, and every time a plane crashes, they've got that information recorded in the black box, and so the airline industry seeks to make improvements. They don't put people's lives at risk, but the builders don't do that. It just makes you wonder.
If they know the government are protecting them, they will never change. And that's why Master Builder Barrett was created with a 35% defect rate. Just think that through, everyone listening and us. 35% of their blocks of flats under the developer contract are so dangerous they put your life at risk with critical defects. And they're awarded Master Builder status. And the whole industry is watching that.
That's
the dice.
More than a third of their buildings aren't fit for human habitation.
That's right.
That's nutty. And yet they're the master builders. Hamish, this can't be so.
Sadly, it is. Legislation is what legislation is. regulations are what regulations are. However, there are certain parts of the community who don't feel that there's a need to adhere to either regulatory sort of aspects of it, or even what's written down in sort of clear writing that this is important. We had an instance, and I'm sure it was in Steve's neck of the woods as well. I'm sure it was down near Greenwich Way, where in actual fact a block of flats, I can't remember, I think there were 200 flats in it, and the building regs failed. Now, most of the time we're getting building regulations hidden over, and it's not being investigated properly, and basically they're people being able to get away with it. But this particular block of flats, which was to house over 200 flats, I don't know how many people that would be, but it was actually considered to be a default building and was unfit for people to enter it. At which point in time, the developer builder got everybody moving in. So it's now full up, but it's full up now, but it's a dangerous building because it never met the standards in the first place. Now, this is what we found out about where Steve is in Royal Artillery Quays. It wasn't until after Grenfell that they did actually find that this particular place was built without the appropriate building regulations being applied to it. And of course, we've got this disturbed sort of aspect sort of going on. And I think what Zahrah just actually sort of brought up, we got the situation, and we heard about this last week. There's a tremendous amount of fraud being going on where signatures are being added to documents which mean absolutely nothing. But it just sort of says, yeah, that's all right. But saying that's all right and it being all right are two very, very different things.
Quite right. What to do, Steve? It seems to me that unless we get Lord Lytton's amendment, then we've got no teeth in this.
Well, that's a good link to what I'm doing. So yes, we got the Earl of Lytton's amendment, but we've also got a few little other levers that we've been testing at Royal Artillery Quays. So the first is this very day, I'm pleased to say, the London Fire Brigade are going to be publishing on their website an enforcement notice for all 8 buildings at Royal Artillery Quays.
Yes, but hang on, weren't they initially reticent to take
Yes, they went over the moon to look into the defects, but after a few helpful, challenging emails, they decided they would actually issue an enforcement notice. Okay. Mainly because their own audit back 5 years ago said there's no fire shafts at all at Royal Artillery Quays. Well, if you're a fire service and there's no way of getting up safely on 16-story buildings, you'd have thought they would have listened and looked at their own audit and said, yeah, something needs to be done. Nothing was done. And the same with Greenwich Building Control 5 years ago, they condemned the stairs. So it's very difficult for them not to do anything when their own audits have condemned it. So that's what we're expecting. So at any point today, that should appear on the enforcement notice website of the London Fire Brigade. And we'll know if the Fire Brigade are covering for Barrett or they're actually going to be bold and actually enforce the law. Either way,
it's an interesting time, isn't it? Because until now, there's been questions over loyalties, because the fire brigade, the fire service should have loyalty to no one except for the rest of us. Their loyalty should be with the public, should they not?
Well, the law, the building law, the public can be wrong too, but they should at least look at the law and enforce that. And so that's one lever. The second lever is the council have got back. We told them about a power, and for the lawyers watching, there's a power under Section 36(6) of the Building Act 1984, which hasn't been superseded. The power is still in force, and that allows a local authority to apply to a court for an injunction to remedy at the expense of the building owner any building defects at the time of construction. So that will be paid for by the council, the injunction, and then the rest will be paid for by the building owner. That's our next step. So if the fire brigade don't sort of do the right thing today, then we ask the council to do it. So this is in addition to ways where members of the public can ask our council to stand up for them. They've paid enough council tax, I'm sure, over the years. It's time the councils actually get involved and start fixing some of these buildings. So if this works, or the fire brigade route works, we've got another 2 ways of helping people. But yeah, the Earl scheme is obviously the better way. And I just got an email today MHCLG want me to come in or do an online to discuss some of these issues. So that's the Housing Department under Angela Rayner, Secretary of State for Housing. So we'll see what they how much they want to help.
Report back next week, Steve, and do tell us how it goes. Before I pass over to Hamish, just to sum up, I just want to draw everyone's attention to the fact I'm changing the logo to a QR code that goes to the building safety scheme.org. Please do take a look. You may find it elucidating. Hamish, before we go, would you please take us home?
Right. Each week, well, I guess that's a bit over the top. Each month, we seem to find some other reason why builders, developers, why they should be acting, why they should be doing something. And each layer that is added to this complication to show that what is being carried out, if it's not exactly unlawful, I mean, it is against the law. Some of the style of building that's actually gone forward. There is something that's endangering people's lives. And really, when we look at this from the aspect of Grenfell, Grenfell happened 7 years ago now, yet nobody's pointed the finger to say who's actually responsible for that. So whilst that continues, that discussion continues, the builders, who the dice is loaded very, very heavily for at this moment in time, are sat there hoping, of course, the dice doesn't get unloaded. That dice an appropriate one through.
All right. Well, look, on that bombshell, I'd like to thank our attendees, of course, Zahrah Aullybocus from Nexa Law, Steve Day from buildingsafetyscheme.org, and of course, my Lord and Master, Hamish McClay from Search and Convey. And this is me, Gareth, from the man of many purple hats, just thanking you for your constant attendance. More revelations coming next week. Hopefully, we'll hear some good news from Steve. And I'd say to the rest of you, keep your feet on the ground, try and have some belief in the due process of law, and keep reaching for the stars. Take care, everyone. Until next week. Goodbye.
There's a tale about some folks with hammers and some nails. They'll promise you the moon, but their word always fails.